All right, welcome folks to your lecture on photosynthesis and ATP energy adenosine triphosphate. Triphosphate because that's three phosphates. I'm gonna try to keep this as short as possible. I'm gonna try to keep it under at least like 12 minutes. Take some notes because this is gonna be under quiz points. So if you don't have any notes, you miss all the questions. Good job, you just wasted your time. You'll have to do it again. So do it right the first time. Take some notes, get all the questions right. And if I happen to give you an open note test, those notes will really come in handy. All right, so introduction to photosynthesis. So what is it? It's photosynthesis is a process by which plants, algae, and some bacteria, they use sunlight to make chemical energy, which is usually in the form of sugar. All right, so why is this important? It's essential for producing oxygen. So you can see here, plants and algae use carbon dioxide, and they also take in water. And then the arrow, this is what they're going to make. So the stuff on the left, those are the reactants. They use that. Stuff on the right, that's what they're going to make. Oxygen gas, which we need to breathe in. We wouldn't be alive if we didn't have oxygen gas provided to us by plants and algae. And then it also makes sugar. And even if you don't eat sugar, like, hey, my mom doesn't let me eat sugar, you eat something that has to do with sugar because like plants, they're made out of carbohydrates, which are made out of sugars. So even if you don't eat plants, say you only eat meat, but animals eat plants. So if there were no plants, there would be no animals to eat. So photosynthesis is where we get our oxygen to breathe and also all our food that we eat. Alrighty, some key terms. So remember, write these down in your notes so you have them. All right, the first one is an organelle called a chloroplast. Should sound familiar. We did a project and all like most of the organelles, and chloroplast was one of them. You can see right here this green oval. That's the chloroplast. Chloroplast is where photosynthesis occurs. So this is the organelle that plants have in algae. That's where they're able to make their own food, sugar in the chloroplast. Called chloroplast because it contains a pigment called chlorophyll. And that's the pigment that absorbs sunlight. Now, it's really good at absorbing some wavelengths of light like blue and violet and red. It's not good at absorbing green. Green bounces off, it reflects off. So that's why it reflects off chlorophyll and it hits us in the eye. And that's why plants appear green. All right, some things you probably haven't heard of. This thing called a thylakoid. This is where the chlorophyll is inside the thylakoid. That's all these green discs right here. Each of these green discs is called a thylakoid, and that's what contains the chlorophyll. And you can see here, you're not going to need to know this, but you can write it down if you want. A stack, it looks like a stack of coins or a stack of pancakes. A stack of these thylakoids is called a granum. I don't think you're going to need to know that, but write it down just in case. So why do we care about the thylakoids? Well, that's the site of where the first reaction in photosynthesis takes place. It's called the light dependent reaction. So there's two different reactions in photosynthesis. The first one's called the light dependent reaction and occurs here in these green discs called the thylakoids. All right, the second part of a chloroplast you'll need to know is called the stroma. And that is the gel-like fluid inside the chloroplast. Basically, everything that's outside of those green discs, everything outside of the thylakoids. And why do we care about the stroma? Well, this is where the second part, the second stage or second reaction of photosynthesis takes place. It's got two names. It's called either the light independent reaction. It's called independent because this one doesn't really use sunlight. The first one does. The light dependent reaction, it needs light. The second one doesn't. And it's got another name called the Calvin cycle. All right, so the light dependent reaction that needs light occurs in the green disc called the thylakoids. And the second reaction, the light independent reaction or the Calvin cycle, occurs in the stroma. All righty, so now the summary formula for photosynthesis. Here it is right here. Will you need to know it? Yes, you will. All right, but it's not that hard. All right, so in red on the left side of the arrow, you have your reactants. That's what plants need. And on the right side of the arrow in blue, that's what plants make. All right, so you can see right here, C6H12O6. That's the main thing plants are concerned about making. That is their food. Glucose sugar, they can then break it down through cellular respiration to make their energy. They can also turn that glucose into things like cellulose, and that can turn into things like their leaves and their stems, maybe their roots. And plants also make six molecules of oxygen gas. So you can see right here that plants need six molecules of CO2, six molecules of carbon dioxide. Why is it six? Where did six come from? Well, look right here. Plants need six carbons. There's that little number six there because it says glucose has six carbons in it. So if you only use one carbon dioxide, you're only going to get one carbon atom, but we need six. So that's why it takes six molecules of CO2. It also takes six molecules of H2O. Why six again? Well, look, we need 12 hydrogens to make one glucose. Plants do. So if you have six molecules of H2O, since each water has two hydrogens, six times two is 12. So you need six molecules of water in order to make a glucose. And you can also see plants also make six molecules of O2. All right, so I'm going to write this in with using the little flower down here. All right, so red will be the reactants that's what goes in. So carbon dioxide goes in. Plants will get that from the air. That's what we breathe out. So we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out CO2. That's respiration. It creates CO2. Plants through their roots, usually through their roots, will take in water. They also need that. Remember, they need six of them. And what are they going to make? I'm going to do this in blue, products in blue, reactants in red. Plants are going to make oxygen gas and also glucose. And don't forget that plants also need the energy from sunlight in order to do this, in order to do photosynthesis. And remember, they're going to make six molecules of carbon dioxide. It makes it easy because it's six every time. They need six molecules of water. They're going to make one molecule of glucose, C6H12O6, and they're going to make six molecules of oxygen gas. All right, so there's your summary formula for photosynthesis. All right, two more slides and I'm done. So I'm going to go over the light dependent reaction, the first step of photosynthesis. Then I'm going to go over the light independent / Calvin cycle, the second part of photosynthesis. All right, so we're focusing on, here's the chloroplast right here. I know it's not green, but there's your chloroplast. Here are your green discs. Remember, those are the thylakoids. So we're looking on the left side over here. We're looking on the left side right now. So for honors, you're going to need to know this. For regulars, regular bios, this might be extra credit. I'm not sure. I'll have to talk to the other bio teachers. All right, so remember this occurs in the thylakoid membrane. Those green discs, remember a stack of them is called a granum. So what happens? All right, I'm not going to look at the left, but feel free to write down what's on the left side of the screen. That's for your notes. This is what happens. The energy from sunlight gets absorbed, remember, by the pigment called chlorophyll. And this is where water is used. And you're not going to know the details of this, but water donates an electron. But what you need to know is water blows up. So it blows it up into two hydrogens and oxygen. And since it blew up water and water contains oxygen, this is where oxygen gas gets created and it gets released into the air. All right, but the main thing, plants aren't doing this. Hey, let's make some oxygen so people will be alive. No, plants aren't doing it for us to breathe oxygen. They're getting rid of the oxygen. They don't need it. What they need is energy. And what they're really making is right here. They're making the energy molecule ATP, adenosine triphosphate, has three phosphates. And they're also making this other, it's an electron carrier, NADPH, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide phosphate. Well, you need to know that. You will not. All right, so this guy, we're going to use the energy in ATP and the energy from the electrons that NADPH is carrying, and we're going to use that in the Calvin cycle or the light independent reaction, the second stage of photosynthesis. Now, for this unit, just remember, so NADPH, anytime in this unit and the next one, respiration, if it's 4 or 5 letters and does not form a word, it's always an electron carrier. So NADPH, NADF, NADF. That's not a word. So it's an electron carrier. We're going to have some more. We're going to have NADH. We're going to have FADH2 coming up later. All right. So this is the light dependent reaction. It needs light. It takes water and it makes oxygen. But more importantly for the plant, it makes ATP energy and NADPH, which are going to be needed for the second step of respiration called the Calvin cycle. All right. We made it to our last slide. All right, so the last slide, the previous one, we had the light dependent reaction that's on the left. That's where the energy from sunlight, remember, it occurs in these green discs called the thylakoids. That's where water comes in. The light is going to blow up the water into hydrogen and oxygen. And that's where oxygen gas is going to be released by the plant. But more importantly for the plant, that's where it makes the energy molecules ATP and NADPH. And now we're over here to the right side of the screen, the second step of photosynthesis called the light independent reaction, or otherwise called the Calvin cycle. Remember, that occurs in the stroma of the chloroplast. This is the chloroplast, even though it's not green. So that's all the gel-like fluid outside the green disc is called the stroma. And this is where, remember, it's 6 molecules of CO2. Remember, it was also 6 molecules of of water. So CO2 is going to come in, and the energy from the ATP and the electrons from the NADPH are going to be used to turn CO2 into glucose sugar. Now, it's a different kind of formula right there, but remember, glucose is C6H12O6. Didn't write it very good, but anyways. All right, so the second step, that's where the energy from these two molecules, ATP and NADPH, are used to turn CO2 into glucose sugar. All right, so write down the stuff on the left side of the screen. That's for your notes. And remember, there's going to be some questions coming up. So if you have good notes, they'll be easy questions. If you didn't take any notes, good luck. All right, so I hope this made some sense, and I'll talk to you next time.